In northern Chile, the Atacama Desert extends across a plateau of stone and salt, bordered by the Pacific Ocean to the west and the Andes Mountains to the east. It is considered one of the driest places on Earth. Some weather stations in the region have recorded years without measurable rainfall. The ground holds little vegetation. The air is thin, dry, and exposed to wide temperature shifts between day and night. Near the city of Copiapó, the desert surface appears still. Dirt roads run towards scattered industrial sites carved into the hills. Among them stood the San Jose mine, a copper and gold operation set into fractured rock. From a distance, the mine was unremarkable. Equipment yards, entry tunnels, and ventilation structures broke the monotony of sand and stone. There was no sign from the outside of how deep the shafts extended below. Beneath this landscape, ramps spiraled downward through unstable geology formed millions of years earlier. The descent was gradual but extensive, reaching approximately 700 meters underground. Workers traveled these routes daily in trucks, moving between extraction points and refuge areas carved into the rock. On the morning of the 5th of August 2010, the desert surface gave no indication that events were already in motion below. The sky remained clear. Wind moved lightly across the plateau. Above ground, operations began, as they had on previous days. The San Jose mine had operated intermittently for more than a century. Located roughly 45 kilometers north of Copiapó, it extracted copper and small quantities of gold from narrow veins running through unstable rock formations. Ownership changed several times over decades. By 2010, the mine was managed by Compañía Minera San Esteban Primera. It was considered a medium-scale operation by Chilean standards. The mine had a history of accidents. Records show that safety concerns had led to temporary closures in previous years. In 2007, a miner named Gino Cortez lost a leg in an accident at the site. Government inspections had cited deficiencies, though the mine continued operating after modifications were reported. For many workers, the risks were understood but accepted as part of employment in a region dependent on mining income. On the 5th of August 2010, 33 men reported for work underground. They ranged in age from 19 to 63. Some were experienced shift supervisors and drill operators. Others were mechanics, drivers, or laborers. Several had worked in mining for decades. Some were second-generation miners. The work was physically demanding and technically structured. Crews followed scheduled blasting cycles, material transport routines, and ventilation protocols. Mining in the Atacama region provided steady wages compared to other available employment. Copiapó and surrounding communities relied heavily on mineral extraction. Many of the men had families in the region. Their earnings supported households, education costs, and extended relatives. Employment in the mine was not temporary for most of them. It was part of long-term livelihood. The internal structure of the San Jose mine included a main ramp used for vehicle access, ventilation shafts, refuge areas stocked with limited emergency supplies, and designated extraction zones. The ramp functioned as the primary route for movement in and out of the mine. It descended in a zigzag pattern, allowing trucks to transport ore to the surface. Safety chambers were positioned at intervals, though their capacity and supply levels were limited relative to the total workforce underground. Shifts began early. Workers were transported down the ramp by vehicle. Equipment checks followed. Drilling, reinforcement, and debris clearing were routine tasks. Blasting operations were coordinated to minimize risk, but the geological structure of the mine was known to be unstable. Rockfalls had occurred previously. Reinforcement with steel mesh and bolts was common practice. On that Thursday morning, operations followed normal scheduling. There were no surface-level alerts suggesting structural failure. Communication systems inside the mine functioned through wired networks and radio contact. Above ground, administrative staff monitored production targets and logistics. The miners working that day did not represent a specialized rescue unit or an exploratory expedition. They were part of a standard production shift in an active mine. Their presence underground was not unusual. The depth they reached, approximately 700 meters, was consistent with the mine's operating design. By midday, routine tasks were underway in multiple sectors of the mine. Vehicles moved along the ramp. Drilling continued in assigned zones. Dust circulated through the ventilation system. The day had not yet separated itself from any other in the mine's long operational history. The conditions that would alter that pattern had not yet become visible on the surface. Shortly before 2 p.m., on the 5th of August 2010, a seismic event was registered inside the San Jose mine. Workers underground later described hearing a sharp cracking sound followed by a violent tremor. Large sections of rock detached from the walls and ceiling. Dust rapidly filled the air. Visibility was reduced within seconds. The collapse occurred along the main access ramp, the primary route connecting the lower levels to the surface. An estimated 700,000 tons of rock fell into the passageway. The blockage extended for hundreds of meters, sealing the only viable exit path. Vehicles attempting to move toward the surface encountered debris and impassable sections of crushed stone. Some miners were positioned deeper in the mine when the collapse occurred. Others were in transit along the ramp. All surviving workers retreated toward a designated refuge area, located approximately 700 meters below ground. The chamber had been constructed as an emergency shelter. It contained a limited stockpile of canned food, bottled water, and basic medical supplies intended to sustain a small group for a short duration. Initial assessments focused on determining whether alternate escape routes remained accessible. The mine had ventilation shafts, but they were not designed for evacuation at that depth. Attempts to clear sections of the ramp proved impossible due to the scale of the obstruction and the instability of surrounding rock. Communication lines to the surface were severed during the collapse. Radio systems failed. No immediate contact could be established. Dust continued to circulate through the tunnels, carried by residual airflow. By late afternoon, the miners understood that the main ramp was completely blocked. Without external assistance, there was no viable route to the surface. The temperature underground remained stable, but air quality and resources became immediate concerns. Isolation was no longer theoretical. It was structural and complete. After retreating to the refuge area, the 33 miners gathered to assess their position. The chamber measured roughly 50 square meters. It had been designed as a temporary shelter for a small number of workers in the event of a short-term emergency. It was not equipped to sustain 36 men for an extended period. Inventory began immediately. The available food consisted primarily of canned tuna, peaches, crackers, and a limited supply of milk. The total quantity, if consumed normally, would have lasted only a few days. There were approximately 93 square meters of accessible underground space surrounding the refuge area, but most of it was unlit once the main power supply failed. Luis Urzua, the shift supervisor, assumed coordination of internal organization. He had years of mining experience and was familiar with emergency protocol. The first decision was rationing. Each miner would receive 2 spoonfuls of tuna, a small portion of milk, and half a cracker every 48 hours. Water was drawn from industrial sources within the mine, including service pipes and natural seepage collected from the rock. Lighting was limited to battery-powered lamps attached to helmets. To preserve energy, illumination was reduced whenever possible. The temperature underground remained near 30 degrees Celsius. Humidity was high. Air circulation continued through secondary ventilation channels, though airflow was reduced. The first days were marked by uncertainty. There was no confirmation that anyone on the surface knew their location or condition. Equipment noise above ground could not be heard at that depth. The men understood that rescue operations, if initiated, would require drilling through hundreds of meters of solid rock. Routine became essential. Urzua divided responsibilities. Small groups were assigned to monitor food supplies, maintain hygiene zones, and inspect accessible tunnels for safety. A schedule was established to regulate sleep and wake periods, though the absence of natural light disrupted normal circadian rhythm. Without sunrise or sunset, time became abstract. Watches were used to preserve a shared understanding of day and night. Sanitation was addressed with limited materials. A designated area was separated for waste. Efforts were made to maintain order in a confined space where stress levels were rising. Physical exercise was encouraged in small intervals to maintain circulation and muscle function. The miners discussed the possibility of drilling teams attempting contact from the surface. However, they were aware of the geological instability that had caused previous accidents. San Jose had experienced significant rockfalls before. It was possible that the collapse had sealed them in permanently. As days passed, Rations remained strict. Hunger was constant but controlled. The men recorded the date based on personal watches, marking time against the known calendar. Conversations focused on practical matters. Speculation about rescue timelines was restrained. There was no verified information to support optimism or despair. Water collection became critical. Industrial water from vehicle radiators and drilling equipment was treated carefully before consumption. Seepage from rock walls was gathered when possible. Medical issues began to surface, including dehydration, minor infections, and elevated blood pressure among older workers. Psychological stability required discipline. Some miners withdrew into silence. Others maintained conversation to prevent isolation within the group. Religious observance occurred informally among those who practiced. There were no formal services, but moments of collective reflection took place. Above ground, search efforts were underway, though the miners had no confirmation of this. Drilling attempts began within days of the collapse, targeting known refuge locations. Several early boreholes failed to reach the chamber due to miscalculations in mapping the underground layout. The San Jose mine lacked precise, updated schematics. By the second week, food supplies were nearing exhaustion. Rationing continued at minimal levels. Weight loss was visible among all 33 men. Movement slowed. Physical strength declined. But the internal structure of responsibility remained intact. On the 17th day after the collapse, the men heard a distant sound. It was faint and intermittent. At first, it was unclear whether it originated from shifting rock or mechanical drilling. The noise repeated in rhythmic intervals consistent with drilling equipment. The miners gathered near the sound source. They prepared tools in case the drill penetrated the chamber. If contact occurred, they would need to signal their presence immediately. 17 days had passed without external communication. Food reserves were nearly gone. The sound from above continued, cutting slowly through layers of rock. On the 22nd of August 2010, at approximately 6 a.m., one of the exploratory drill bits sent from the surface broke through into an accessible section of the mine near the refuge area. The borehole measured roughly 8 centimeters in diameter. It had reached a depth of about 688 meters. When the drill penetrated the chamber, the miners were present nearby. They heard the final break in the rock and saw the drill bit emerge. Dust settled around the opening. For the first time since August 5, there was physical confirmation that the surface search teams had located their position. Using red paint from a vehicle maintenance kit, the miners attached a written message to the drill bit before it was retracted. The note read, "Estamos bien en el refugio, los 33." In English, "We are well in the refuge, the 33." The message was sent upward through the narrow borehole. On the surface, engineers and rescue coordinators retrieved the drill and found the note attached. Confirmation of survival was announced publicly later that day. The information ended 17 days of uncertainty for families waiting outside the mine and for authorities coordinating the search. The borehole immediately became a lifeline. Through it, small packages were lowered in reinforced tubes. These capsules, later known as palomas, carried glucose solutions, rehydration fluids, and communication devices. Food was initially restricted to liquids to prevent digestive shock after prolonged starvation. Medical teams established structured monitoring from the surface. Each miner received basic health questionnaires via written exchange. Instructions were given for gradual caloric increases. Psychologists advised maintaining routine and leadership structure inside the chamber. Video equipment was eventually lowered, allowing limited visual contact. Footage showed the miners gathered in the refuge area, wearing protective helmets and standing in confined space. The images confirmed physical weakness but organized conditions. 3 separate drilling plans were initiated to create an extraction shaft large enough to bring the men to the surface. The effort involved Chilean state agencies, private contractors, and international engineering consultants. Each drilling operation carried risk. Geological instability remained a concern. The borehole sustained communication, but extraction would require a tunnel approximately 66 centimeters in diameter. Engineers estimated that drilling could take several weeks. For the miners, confirmation of rescue did not alter their location. They remained 700 meters underground. The difference was informational rather than physical. After contact was established, The structure inside the refuge area became more formalized. Supplies arrived daily through the narrow borehole. Caloric intake was increased gradually under medical supervision. Protein supplements, vitamins, and electrolyte solutions were lowered in measured quantities. Solid food followed in controlled portions. Once digestive systems stabilized, medical staff on the surface monitored each miner's condition through written reports and video feeds. Basic diagnostic tools were improvised underground. Blood pressure readings were taken using equipment sent down in segments. Eye infections, skin irritation, and dental pain were reported and managed remotely with prescribed treatments. 2 miners were identified as having more serious health risks, including diabetes and pre-existing respiratory issues. These conditions required additional monitoring. Despite improved nutrition, physical weakness remained evident. 17 days of extreme rationing had reduced body weight across the group. Muscles had atrophied from limited movement in confined space. Exercise routines were introduced under instruction to prevent further decline. Psychological strain developed gradually. The miners now knew they would be rescued, but the timeline extended beyond initial expectations. Engineers estimated weeks of drilling. The enclosure measured only a few dozen meters across. Privacy was limited. Artificial lighting replaced natural cycles entirely. Structured daily schedules were maintained. Leadership responsibilities continued under Luis Urzua. Group meetings were held to discuss updates transmitted from the surface. Families recorded video messages that were delivered through the borehole system. Responses were sent upward in writing. Above ground, 3 drilling plans identified as Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C progressed simultaneously. Each used different equipment to increase the probability of success. The drilling process involved navigating unstable rock formations that had caused the original collapse. Any misalignment risked delay or additional cave-ins. International attention intensified. Media outlets established a presence near the mine entrance. Government officials visited the site. Technical decisions were scrutinized publicly. Engineers adjusted drilling angles to avoid weakened zones mapped after the collapse. Time underground was measured by shift rotations and delivery intervals. Noise from drilling above could occasionally be heard, though it was distant and intermittent. The sound provided confirmation that progress continued, but the pace remained uncertain. Weeks passed in this pattern. Health indicators stabilized but did not improve dramatically. Emotional fatigue replaced initial anxiety. The environment remained unchanged. Confined space, artificial light, constant temperature. The rescue depended entirely on mechanical precision and geological stability. Until a full extraction shaft reached the refuge chamber, the miners remained in the same position they had occupied since August 5. On the 9th of October 2010, drilling equipment operating under Plan B completed a 6.6 centimeter wide shaft reaching the refuge chamber. The tunnel extended approximately 622 meters vertically, following weeks of continuous boring and reinforcement. Steel casing was installed along unstable sections to reduce the risk of collapse during extraction. Engineers prepared a cylindrical rescue capsule known as the Phoenix. The device measured 54 centimeters in diameter and was equipped with oxygen supply, communication systems, and external wheels to guide its ascent through the shaft. Medical personnel, rescue specialists, and mining engineers coordinated procedures from the surface. Extraction began shortly after midnight, on the 12th of October 2010. The first miner brought to the surface was Florencio Avalos. The ascent took approximately 15 minutes. Medical staff conducted immediate evaluations upon arrival. Each miner followed individually, in a predetermined order based on health condition and operational strategy. Throughout the operation, the procedure remained controlled. Communication between the capsule and surface teams was maintained during each ascent. The narrow dimensions of the shaft required precise alignment. Engineers monitored structural integrity continuously. The final miner, shift supervisor Luis Urzua, reached the surface on the 13th of October 2010. In total, the extraction process lasted nearly 22 hours. All 33 miners survived the entrapment. After emerging, the men were transported to a field hospital established near the mine site for medical assessment. Most were later transferred to a hospital in Copiapó for further evaluation. Diagnoses included malnutrition, minor infections, dental issues, and elevated stress indicators. No fatalities occurred during the entrapment or rescue operation. The mine entrance remained surrounded by equipment and personnel. The drilling rigs were powered down. The shaft stood as evidence of the operation that had connected the surface to the chamber below. In the months following the rescue, the San Jose mine remained closed. Investigations examined safety practices, inspection records, and regulatory oversight. Chilean authorities reviewed mining standards nationwide. Legal proceedings addressed responsibility for operational failures that preceded the collapse. The 33 miners entered a period of medical follow-up and public attention. Some returned to work in mining, others pursued different paths. Psychological studies later documented symptoms consistent with prolonged confinement, including sleep disruption and anxiety. Government and private funds were established to support medical and financial needs. The rescue operation became a reference point in global mining safety discussions. International engineering collaboration during the drilling phase was widely studied. The design of the Phoenix capsule influenced future confined space extraction planning. The Atacama Desert remained unchanged. The mine entrance, once active, stood quiet against the dry plateau. Beneath it, the collapsed ramp and sealed tunnels remained in place. The event concluded without loss of life, but it altered regulatory scrutiny and public awareness of underground risk.